Another beautiful morning on Sunrise Daily. Welcome, I'm Ayo Makinde.
Rise and shine. It's a beautiful Wednesday morning here in Lagos, Nigeria's commercial capital. I'm Kayode Okikelu, and you're welcome. Should we talk about the civil service today?
Well, we certainly need to talk about everything that needs to be talked about. But you know, for me, I've often said that if there is any sector in the country, whether state or federal, even local governments, that's the engine of government. So the people that make the news are like the body of the car, the aesthetics that you see. You get in the car, you sit in the car. Those are the people you see. Yeah. But that's not the engine of government. Who wants to get into a vehicle and you open the bonnet just to check? You don't do that, you know. So for me, that is the engine of government, and most certainly we need to talk about it.
And it's important to pay attention to it, the same way you pay attention to your engine. Because once the engine knocks, as I say, the car isn't moving anywhere. And I mean, this came to fore again yesterday where the head of service spoke about, you know, some fake employment letters, having to stop, I think, this salary of 3,000 because there were issues with that. But, you know, the fake employment letter was a part that got me about 1,000 or 1,500. And I was thinking about it. Can a random person approach a company today with a fake letter of appointment and get work? Not just get work, start receiving, or at least be enrolled in the payroll and start receiving salaries. And I tried to think about it. I tried to think about the different possibilities, and I just told myself that person will be stopped at the gate. Not even at the end, not even at the reception, at the gate, because it doesn't quite add up. I mean, you didn't maybe go through the employment process. You know, there's an interview, recruitment process generally. You didn't go through it, so definitely there will be no link. So it raised questions. Yes, it is good that the civil service, the ICPC, and all of them came together to identify these people, but it also raises questions about the processes. And I'd love to hear at least what is being done to tighten that process, because we cannot overemphasize the role, the importance of civil service in Nigeria. So I imagine that if someone can start work, get enrolled with a fake employment letter, what more can be done? How many contracts can be awarded, or how much money can be lifted with the wrong document? Well, that looks like the right one, but clearly the fake one. I mean, you can extrapolate and see the imports, as it were, the wide import of this. So it's important that we pay attention to the civil service. I can go on and tell you about how we need more, we need better services, because these services we pay for, as it were, or at least if you're not paying for these services, it's a service that comes to you clearly as a citizen of Nigeria. So clearly there needs to be some more effectiveness and efficiency in them. I can mention, you know, these agencies, departments, and all of that. But this morning, I just like, if you're a civil servant and a public servant, civil servant, private servant, whatever servant you are, I just like to implore us to, you know, to do the right things. I know that it can be very difficult, but that's the least that is expected of us. We have a social contract. I know a lot of us have religious leanings and all of that, so maybe I should appeal through that. We should do the right thing. In front of that desk, do the right thing.
You know, what is interesting is that the part that you talked about, the process, there is absolutely no way that anything gets done without certain processes. It's just simple math. I mean, you don't go into a home, okay, and you decide that when you want to eat, you take your food to the front of the gate. You wear your, agbada, you put the food on the ground. I mean, there are some things that are just unthinkable. So I think it only begs the question of vision. I can't say that more than enough. You know, because if, for instance, there are people who will say, no, don't worry, just take this letter to so-so person in the office, they will accept it, we build relationships across board, and, it's only fair to ask the question, how did that happen in the first place? Are we talking about ghost workers for the first time? We're not talking about ghost workers.
I think that's a term exclusive to Nigeria in some sense.
Well, it's not something that is new to us. We are not hearing this term for the first time. It's something that's been almost age-long. And I'm wondering if you ever heard that kind of term in a corporate organization. as we have large corporations in this country that have workers up to 5,000, 15,000, and the rest of them. But I don't know if there is ever such a process where you will have ghost workers, or what's the term?
Illegal workers.
Illegal workers in an organization who are earning salaries. There is going to be a trail to everything. So I think that it's about time we ask the question, how did that happen and for how long has it happened? And all the bosses in the rank and file ought to be asked questions. I can't say this again. You referenced it yesterday, so forgive me if I mention it again. The Auditor General's report is something that we have. It's an instrument that is supposed to help us to deal with some of these issues. Has there been a time where we actually sat down to look at these instruments that we have as a government, as a people, and say, you know what, let's take a look at our processes, because without the process, forget it, it's not going to happen. Why do some vehicles, become ramshackled over time? It's simply because you buy a car, all right, and the car begins to develop some tiny, tiny faults, and before you know what is happening, you go to quote-unquote rewire, and they begin to bypass this one.
Rewire it literally.
Rewire it literally. This one is not important, that one is not important. So what of the people who made it? Were they dumb? Okay, so there is a way things are supposed to be run. The moment we begin to cut corners and shortchange the process, that is when we begin to have problems. So the vehicles that got bad over time, it is simply because we circumvented the processes of those vehicles. The engine gets knocked, the vehicle, goes out of function, and before you know what is happening, you have to buy another one. There are people who have used vehicles for 10, 15, 20 years and nothing happened to the vehicle. There are those who use a car for 2 years and before you know what is happening, that guy is gone. The engine of Nigeria's running government in Nigeria, federal, state, or local, is the civil service. And we cannot, don't forget, it's service. We cannot do we can't talk about it too much, that we need to focus on that engine of government. We pay so much attention to political appointees, to elected officials, and all of that, and that is good. You talked about the further implications. Civil servants, I don't know the classes you will put the military, the police, the NSCDC, the security apparatus of government. I don't know the pockets that you find there, but you find out that these all, one way or the other, directly or indirectly,
you can actually call them civil servants.
They draw pay from the system. So is this the same? Will we find this kind of culpability in these agencies of government as well?
I recall what the Auditor General of Bauchi states that we had yesterday, saying that, auditing is beyond what did you use the money for. It is, did this money you spent achieve the purpose? So can we say that, we budget, wages and salaries actually takes a huge chunk of our budget. So can we say that that money we're spending to pay salaries and all that gets us what the returns, as it were, we need? And I think that's another angle. We need to start running our civil service as a corporate organization. The same way nobody can just waltz into a company and say, hey, I'm about to start work.
I wish we would get to that point. I really pray that we'll get to that point.
I know that the head of service has spoken about that, some of the things they have been doing, but it's important to know where we are right now and where we ought to get to, because from what we still see across some civil services, we have a lot of work to do.
Absolutely.
Well, we have a lot of work to do on the show this morning, so this is just a little part of it. We're back with the dailies in a moment. Stay with us.
Well, the papers are next, but if you missed the news at 10 yesterday, you may go to our YouTube page to look at it, because that's where you'll find the story that we just teased at the beginning.
Very juicy one at that.
And yes, exactly. So let's take a look at the papers this morning, begin with the Guardian newspaper. And it is talking about something that is very, very, exactly, what do you have on the paper, on the front page? Why Kaduna is vulnerable to attacks despite military presence. It's a question so many people have asked, and a question we've raised on this program a few times, but find out the details of that on the front page of the paper. Continues on page 2. Terrorists raid military base, kill 17 soldiers in Kaduna. Not the kind of thing that we want to wake up to, but unfortunately, it's our reality. Reps, Amechi service chiefs meet, pledge to turn tide on insecurity. Nigeria bleeding, says Tinubu. Army, we're reviewing security architecture to bridge gaps, build troops resolve. That's the lead of the paper this morning. While that is going on, certainly politics is not taking the back seat. Right below the picture on the front page, PDP jettisons zoning, throws open contest for presidential ticket. That story is on page 2 of the Guardian newspaper today.
Oh, goodness. We'll take a look at leadership. I was trying to scan for some cheery news at least, but this is what you find on the front page of the leadership newspaper. 7 days after a train attack, terrorists kill 15 soldiers in Kaduna. I see the Guardian reported 17. The leadership reporting 15. Some have reported 10, 11. One is too much. Now, over 10, I don't know. Sometimes really depressing to see these stories. Our soldiers should reiterate. And you see the statement as a writer. Nigeria is bleeding, Tinubu. El Rufai says, we're at crossroads. Reps, service chiefs in 5-hour meeting. Lawmakers allege moles in military. I mean, it's something that has been, well, thought about, has been said, but now it's coming out.
There's a House Committee of Intelligence, right? If those moles are there, if they allege that there are moles in the military, for instance, and don't we have a committee on intelligence that should do something to ensure that the intelligence community in the nation, the DMIs, the NIAs, and the rest of them, do their jobs and fish them out?
And you know, this is something we have seen. Well, thankfully, it's been booted out in the civil service, as it were, illegal workers. So, is that the case here as well? How did this happen, if indeed it's the reality? But you can't wish this away. The thing staring you in the face. Just want to get explanations. A couple of other stories on the front page. Of course, that FG uncovering 1,000 fake jobs, suspending 3,000 workers' salaries is also on the front page. But take a look at this one. 2023, PDP jettisons zoning, throws presidential ticket open. Well, I understand that decision is meant to be submitted to the higher organ of the party, but it looks like it's, escaping in bits and pieces to the press. So we'll see if that is indeed the case. A couple of other stories, but we'll leave it there for the leadership. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, gentlemen. What a morning it is. A morning of mixed news, so to speak. But look at what the Vanguard has on its front page this morning. Shock as terror attack on army base claims 17 soldiers. Yes, so you say you've seen disparate figures. They have 17 here. 40 injured. Terrorists raise 3 armored vehicles, seize arms. Ansaru terrorists taxing, kidnapping people in Birnin Gwari Emirates. That's according to BEPU. Terrorists aiming to paralyze Nigeria, says COAS. Adds security architecture being reviewed to bridge gaps, bolster fighting will of troops. That is also there on the front page. They also have, as you've noted earlier, politics as well. The picture speaks politics. So does this story. 2023 presidency, Autumn's committee throws PDP ticket open. That is also on the front page as well. Kyari rallies Nupeng, Nato, others support to tackle crude oil theft. So you find that story on page 8. So I guess he figures, sometimes you need the transporters to take this crude that is stolen. Maybe if we pally with the Transport Association, we might be able to make some headway. You might want to read that story on page 8 of the paper. Other stories just been on top of the nameplate. 9 days after train attack, whereabouts of 141 passengers still unknown. Okay. 2023 presidency, politicians against zoning lack conscience. That's according to Igbo elders. But while you're looking at stories that, border on politics, take a look at this one. Nigeria's public debt to rise above 50 trillion naira. Yes, you heard right. 50 trillion naira. That's also on the front page. Your Mr. and Mrs. is there, and much as I'm really tempted to take it, because it reminds me of a song I like, I'm not going to take it because I want you to focus on the matters at hand. Pretty serious this morning. Your sports on the back page is right there for you. NFF laughs off Olise's return to Super Eagles. That story is also there. Yeah, is it being thought about? NFF is laughing, so maybe that's not in the horizon. Let's leave it there for Vanguard newspapers.
The Daily Trust newspaper this morning is also talking about insecurity. Act now. Elders tell Buhari, as the lead of the Daily Trust newspaper. Nigeria never had it this bad. Anayeko and Kwande say 15 soldiers, 2 civilians, 3 vigilantes killed in Kaduna. Bandits can be wiped out in 6 months. That's ascribed to ex-generals. There are those who will say we've heard this before, so why haven't we wiped them out? Also reminds me of something ascribed to the governor of Kaduna State recently. We know where these people are. We know. We're reviewing our tactics. That's ascribed to the army. Find out the details on page 5 of the paper this morning. And right below the pictures on the front page of military equipment burnt during the attack on a forward operation base. 2023 will bar parties that violate electoral law. That's ascribed to INEC. Insists on June 3 deadline for primaries. Exercise must be conducted in constituencies. Find out the details of that on the front page with the stories on page 14 of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. Secrecy plagues MDA's revenues, spending as Open Treasury portal shuts down. Is this asking questions about whether or not there are things to hide? The story you'll find on page 22 of the Daily Trust newspaper today.
Well, if you take a look at the Daily Times, you see how the paper is keeping it simple this morning. Daily Times has, I think, about 3 stories. First is from Governor Okowa, saying Nigeria exceedingly troubled. We must stop the drift. Advocates consultation of former leaders, traditional rulers, others to find lasting solutions to country's challenges. On top of the nameplate, you have that one from President Buhari saying Nigeria now fertilizer powerhouse in Africa. Well, some cheery news, really, I should say. And, of course, the picture shows the former governor of Lagos State, now a presidential hopeful, visiting the governor of Kaduna State yesterday. So those 3 stories you find on the front page of the Daily Times this morning. Markway.
Well, New Telegraph has this focusing on politics for you. 2023 presidency. It's open contest for aspirants in PDP. That's what you see there as party throws ticket open to 6 geopolitical zones. Zoning committee adopted arrangements to avoid discontent among party members. It's morally wrong to continue as member. That's according to Fayoshi. What? Continue as member of what? Is it of the party or of the committee? Or I don't know. Because yesterday we saw the governor of Benue State, who's the chairman of the zoning committee, says the decision was unanimously reached. And he didn't disclose the decision, by the way. All of this is still speculation, but perhaps there is some confirmation from sources. So that is what it is. Page 5 will give you details so you know where that has come from. So far, 13 aspirants have purchased parties 40 million naira form. Yeah, they had to put that there for you to let you know just how much a presidential nomination form costs. You also see this, 2023, we won't monitor illegitimate primaries. That's from INEC, says non-compliance with Electoral Act in nullity. Tallinn raises issues of fair participation for women. That's also there. 17 soldiers feared killed, 19 injured. That story is on the corner. NLC, ASO strike patriotic way to reposition education sector. And insecurity, investors express doubt over 2023 elections as FDI, that's foreign direct investment, faces huge threat. So that is also on the front page. I saw this story yesterday, and I think it's something that must be highlighted, that much as we have signed the 2022 budget into law, the 2021 budget is still operational. Yeah. Senate extends 2021 budget execution to May 31, 2022. Approves creation of Health Education Practitioners Board. So that is also there on the front page. And I don't know if we've taken the story, but this is also there. Kanu's brother to Soludo, IPOB, not criminals, to be granted amnesty. So I guess that's going to cause some controversy. Who gets amnesty? When the Niger Delta militants got amnesty, were they criminals? You might want to read the story on page 29 of the paper. Let's leave it there for New Telegraph.
Nigerian News Direct this morning is talking a little bit about the economy. Tax evasion. Senate orders FG to stop airing IOCs from lifting crude oil. That's the lead of the Nigerian News Direct this morning. Stories on page 3. Directive will be near impossible to implement. Senate must conduct thorough investigation into IOC's financial records. As subscribed to Bala, find out the details of that on the inside pages of the paper this morning. And right above the nameplate, fight this one, will be creative in financial model for Lagos. That's subscribed to the governor, Sanwo-Olu. And I'm wondering, wait a minute, is that direct or indirect reference to that conversation of yesterday?
I don't like you said director. What's the other one?
Consensus?
Really? Wow.
I mean, come on, you asked a question. I said you.
I'm not talking about electoral acts. Wow, nice one.
Well, that and a number of other stories on the front page. World Water Day, Dangote, others make case for groundwater protection. Stories on page 3. Find out the details of that on the front page and the inside pages of the paper today.
Thank you for that laugh. I can't remember when last I had that one. Let's wrap up with Daily Independent. Now take a look at what you have on the front page of Daily Independent newspaper this morning. PDP zoning committee finally throws presidential ticket open. And as Mark said, well, they didn't quite say that to the public, so perhaps this is from sources, as you hear. Fayose resigns committee membership over presidential ambition, so maybe that explains the rider Mark was asking about earlier on. Of course, the INEC story makes its way to the front page as well. But take a look at this one. Politics is very local, and the subnationals should be getting a lot of attention as well. Governors to hold emergency meeting on insecurity with state assemblies speakers. It's a page 29 read. So perhaps some solutions can come from there as well. I know we always focus on the center when it comes to security, but there's work for all the levels. Well, maybe the 2 levels that are at least allowed to operate at this time. So there you go, the Daily Independent newspaper for you this morning.
And with that, we wrap up a look at the papers this morning. We're back right after now. The issues are beckoning.
Crowd and queues resurface as citizens desperately make efforts to link their phone numbers to their national identity number at this National Identity Management Commission office in Lagos. The apprehension follows the expiration of the deadline set by the regulatory authority, which means they can only receive calls at best. Some of them allege that preferential treatment by officials stalls the process of registration and validation.
Let the management find a way to ensure that once you come, they identify those who are coming as a first-timer to take their biodata, they identify those that have inquiries, they identify those that needs to be revalidated. Once they are able to do this, though they are trying their little best, but I believe they can improve on what they are doing presently.
Others narrate their experiences while making various submissions.
I was renewing my international passport sometime last year, and the immigration office called me that there's a mistake in my date of birth. And since last year, I've been here since last year, October, trying to correct it. And I'm here today, and they also informed me I should come back in 4 weeks' time. Why would we all keep on going in this circle, unbreakable chain of inefficiency?
When I come here, crowd was too much. You understand? So I now go to other agent, outside agent. They collect my money for the first split, 3,000 naira. I'm here since morning. Nobody even answer me. They say I should go and fill the form and come and collect the number.
The federal government has at multiple occasions extended the national identity number and SIM card linkage deadline following delays by some persons to comply, while others complain of the process. According to statistics, there are about 197 million active mobile users, with 125 claiming to have successfully linked their NI into SIM cards, while about 72 million Nigerians are yet to comply.
Let's get into this conversation now. It's been a long time coming. You remember the last deadline extension by the federal government was until March the 31st. And now we have what we have on our hands now. So let's get into this conversation. How far so far? Chief Adeolu Ogunbanjo joins us this morning in our studio. He is the National President, National Association of Telecom Subscribers, NATCOMs. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
We also have Engineer Benga Adebayo, who is Chairman, Association of Licensed Telecom Operators of Nigeria, Alton. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Well, we saw your the press release from your association. We want to first of all clear, have your members started implementing the directive of the federal government?
Yes, we have started. Since we received the directive on 4th of April 2022, we have started.
One would expect that there's been a lot of feedback from subscribers. What's the response been from your members?
It's been a lot of pressure at the various experience centers. There's also been a lot of pressure on the systems. It has been a lot of concerns expressed by members of the public to our various contact centers. So it appears that the heat is coming to all of us at this time. Unfortunately, like you have said in the opening remarks, we've been on this now for 14 months. Many people didn't respond to the call to link their SIM with their NIN. And so we are where we are. But certainly the last 24 hours has witnessed enormous pressure at the various operating centers for the various members of our association. So the times are difficult, actually, I must say.
Just to also be clear, what is the process of barring these lines? Do you have the service providers doing it individually, or everyone has done it? Is it an incremental process, or everyone is on the same page right now?
We are all on the same page. It's all networks in one network. Since the directive was received to bar outgoing calls for those who have not linked their NIN with their SIM record, we have done that, and it's been done across all the networks.
No one is left out in this. No one is saying, well, let's hold off a bit.
No. We are a highly regulated industry, and upon receipt of the regulatory directive to that effect, we have since complied.
Pardon me, just to clear the air, because a lot of information going back and forth. When was this complied with? Was it on the 1st of April, or when exactly?
4th of April. 4th of April.
On the 4th?
4th of April. Yes.
So that's 2 days ago?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So let's come into the studio now. I know you've had your reservations about this whole process from the scratch, even before the scratch, but does that remain for you, the reservations you've had? Are they still the same today as it was in the past?
Yes, stemming from the fact that a number of subscribers are still not linked. And again, you see, when you look at the entire process, getting to the NIN centers, particularly in the rural areas, I'm yet to see whether the NIMC, the Nigerian Identity Management Commission, has, put in NIN centers in all the 774 local government headquarters. Particularly, for instance, there are some states that created more local governments. These local governments, how would the man in the rural area travel from one place to the other to go and do the SIM linkage now? And if it is, for instance, where they have these NIN centers in the local government areas, it will take some time. I mean, these people are, rural dwellers, and they need time. For instance, they have to travel from one place to the other because they want to link their SIM to the National Identity Management Portal. So there's a whole load of issues surrounding all this.
But you're also aware, Chief, that it wasn't only the NIN centers, the NIMC offices, that this activity could have been carried out. There were times when they had a number of agents running into, hundreds of agents that they could do this with, including the telcos themselves.
Thank you very much. I've been to some of the telcos. Thank God Engineer Adebayo is here. Some of the telco centers, the experience centers, cannot do more than 10 in one day because of issues surrounding the uploading and the capacity of NIMC to actually, get uploaded. A number of issues, and government should actually really address this. Go to these centers. Only about 8, 9, 10 weeks ago, the whole thing crashed for about 3 weeks. Nothing was able to be uploaded. And these are issues still surrounding these NIN things. It's only about 14, 15 months old. Remember when we were, asked to do our SIM registration at that point in time? They started the next 6 months. Here we are today. It took about 3, 4 years, but here we are today. But 15 months is too premature to now start saying.
I don't know.
And at that time, we were only about over 100 million subscribers. Now we're about 197 million.
Well, Chief, this is where we are now. And this matter isn't new to every one of us. And these issues that you're raising now, are they issues that have been raised before? Most certainly we'll take them up with Engineer Adebayo. But are these issues that have been raised before and no action was taken, like the one you are saying now that telcos could do a very, very minimal number of registrations in a day?
The issues are still, honestly, the same.
Were they raised with anyone? Were they raised with the telcos?
We can only complain, like we've been complaining. It's left for government, for instance, to, in fact, sit with the telcos. For instance, at each 3 months extension, telcos, the government should say, Minister Pantami should understand that he meets with the telcos. What have you been able to do? What percentage? What can we do? How can we get these people, the subscribers to get registered? Again, all these national orientation agencies and agencies of government, what have they been doing? Have they been enlightening people up to the rural areas? There are more questions than answers.
Let's try to get these answers. I know that there's a chain. So we, the subscribers, and I say we, interestingly, there's the service providers, and there's the government championing all of this. But let's go to Engineer Adebayo and get a sense. So complaints about uploading, first of all. excuse me, and listening to the subscribers there trying to link it. Some have had issues since last year, October, trying to upload, come back today, come back next week. What exactly is the problem with uploading? Is it from the service providers? Is it from where the database is warehoused? What exactly is the challenge here?
It is not a problem from the service providers, but I'd like to put the issues in proper perspective. In the first instance, we all have national obligation to enlist ourselves at the database of the National Identity Management Commission. That's what government has said. Government has gone a step further to say you must now link this national identification number with your SIM card records from the operators. Deadline has been set, was set prior to 2020 when the minister gave the ultimatum that it has to be done before the end of December. And we've been on it for almost a period of 4 years. Now, between December 2020 and now, we've had about 8 different extensions on the turnaround for this process. And so it's been a lot of time and also has been a lot of work. We have worked together in one digital ecosystem with the National Identity Management Commission. And part of the problem we identified in the early days was that NIN-SIM is not able to cover all parts of the country. And the Honorable Minister then directed that telecom operators should be allowed to capture data of citizens at most and all or all of their experience centers. By that, we increase the spread of the point of access. In essence, not only in NIN-SIM offices, but also at the center of the operators. And like you also said, a number of agents also work for NIN-SIM. So there has been a number of access points in the last 14 months, which we expect that people should have been able to take a turn, take a queue, and have this done. That's one point. The second is that we capture the data as telecom operators. We do not generate the NIN numbers. So you go to an experience center, you capture the data there. We send that data to the systems of the National Identity Management Commission and expect them to generate the NIN number and then confirm that to the subscribers. That's not in our control as service providers. So what we should do now at our end, we are doing it. Experience centers are capturing data. Information is being provided and uploaded to NIN-SIM. What happens at the NIN-SIM end is absolutely not in our control. And so if you see any bottleneck today, I make bold to say it's not on the side of the service providers, but rather this is something that we need to challenge NIN-SIM to see how to resolve. So it's a lot of work in progress. Unfortunately, the time passed and it passed very quickly. As it is in our character as a people, we will not respond until there's a deadline. And that's why we have the amount of pressure that we now have. But there are ways around it. Once you have the NIN numbers, there are different mechanisms by which this can be linked to the NIN card. You don't need to the same reg. You don't have to go to the experience center. You can do that virtually. You can do that using the mobile apps. You can do that using dialing a code on the operator's network and all that. So I think the challenge we have at this time is actually in having the NIN-SIM generate those numbers, not necessarily the problem of access or having those numbers uploaded and or integrated into the operator's network. So it's not on our desk. I'll say that it's a task for NIN-SIM, and NIN-SIM has to find a way to crack the hard nuts.
And no doubt this takes its toll on your operations. Yes, it is not a challenge with yours, on your side, but it takes its toll. So, and I'll ask the question my colleague raised earlier about, having a conversation. Is it with the ministry? Is it with NIN-SIM? What are the issues? Because, the telcos are techie people. I imagine that you can bring to bear some sort of, experience, equipment maybe, and help generally. So has there been like a discussion saying, well, these are the issues we have noticed for 14 months. What can we do to resolve this? Or what is being done to resolve this? Because it is understandable that millions of Nigerians will throng. So we need at least a system that has that much strength to take in all of that pressure.
Yeah, there's been lots of conversation around this, and we have a joint industry working committee that is interfacing with the two regulators on our side with the NCC, and also on the other side with NIN-SIM. And we've been together on this digital ecosystem committee addressing the challenges. And really and truly, we've done all that we can in supporting NIN-SIM in this regard. But the problem is not just in all of this that we're talking about, is that people didn't respond appropriately in the last 14 months. It's more of that, actually. I've been to a few of those centers at times. They didn't just have anyone to attend to. So I think it's more of a behavioral problem on our side that's now led to this escalation that we have. Certainly the problems are known. We've identified the problem. We provided intervention at different times as an industry, and at the various level of our different members, they provided some form of intervention to support the agency of NIN-SIM. But the fact remains that people didn't respond on time when they should respond. And we are now where we are. We just need to do all that we can to make it easy for everyone. Let's look at the greater good. The greater good of this is national security and to have credible and reliable national database. And we all must buy into that directive of government. So in all of this, where it will be a bit painful, it will be a bit difficult, but it's something that we must embrace, all as citizens of Nigeria and as those who reside here.
Okay, we'll definitely take on that security angle in the coming, segment of the program, because it's also a very important one. But quickly on the side, before I come back to Lagos studio here, so what happens with people whose lines have been barred that are still trying to, get maybe registered or link it? Will they be restored afterwards, or this is gone for good or for bad for them now? What happens?
Once they are able to produce their NIN number and present that to the service provider at any of the access and or contact point, whether by virtual means or by way of uploading it on the app, the services will be restored. But I must say that no service will be restored unless there's a provision, unless by provision of an NIN number. There will be no partial lifting of services until people provide. Those who have been barred now, until they provide the NIN number, there will be no lifting of services, unfortunately.
Speak to the issue that Chief Ogunbanjo raised earlier, Engineer Adebayo, when he said that, well, as you also, underscored, that one of the main issues is that the telcos and those agents do not generate NIN. So, in other words, they are still not registered. So it means that even the intervention of getting agents isn't answering the question or resolving the issues as raised by Chief Ogunbanjo. Is that correct?
Yes, because we don't generate the NIN number. All we do is to capture citizens' data and upload it onto the NIN-SIM database. So the challenge in actually getting a response to that effect is on the systems of NIN-SIM, not on the side of the service providers.
So while on one hand, government made this effort, it's on the other hand, it is still at the foot of government to ensure that whether or not people get fully registered as they should, because the intervention is just to take a first step and eventually still get back to the NIN-SIM offices. That's what you're saying.
In essence, yes, but also we take responsibility as citizens. We've been 14 months on this journey. People could have done better, actually. All of us could have done better. In spite of almost at all time when you make a call on any of the operators' network in the last 14 months, you get some form of SMS alert saying to you, link up your NIN with it. In essence, you get some form of indication to say that in case you haven't done it, you get a reminder, please go and do it. But 14 months has passed. We all looked at this as if it's just a wish, and now the reality has come to us. So we can blame government, but also we share in this blame as citizens as well. People didn't respond enough like they should have done in the last 14 months.
Okay, well, I'm sure Chief Ogunbanjo will respond to that in a moment, but the numbers that are barred, it's only outgoing calls from those numbers, not calls going into those numbers.
Yes, outgoing calls from those numbers. That's the directive as it stands today.
In other words, those numbers can still receive calls.
Yes, they can. That is the directive as of today. Outgoing calls are bad, but they are able to receive incoming calls. So by that, they still have some means of communication. And so there's still a window of time within which they can normalize their NIM and SIM linkage records.
Okay, we'll follow up on that shortly, but Chief Ogunbanjo, you want to respond to the issue that as far as he's concerned, and you would agree with him that 4 years plus 14 months is quite a length of time.
Well, quite honestly, give it up to the telcos. Your first call every morning, they will always tell you, you have to link your blah, blah. Your first call, if you notice, every morning they will remind you. But when you now go to the NIN-SIM centers or the NIN centers, particularly NIN-SIM offices, it's unfortunate that a lot of racketeering is going on. I'm sorry to say this. If you must get it within 2 or 3 days, you must have between 5 or 10,000. There are agents, you go there, it's open. They're not making things easy for the subscriber who wants to really register, link his SIM with NIN. And they say this thing is free. He gets there, he wants to do it, and he's seeing that 1 or 2 people are paying. He doesn't have money, he goes back.
Is that an issue that has been upscaled, taken up with, the administrations? I can confirm what you're saying to an extent. The last time I went to the NIN-SIM office to do some work on my identity, some guy at the gate was asking, making inferences. And I reported the fellow instantly to the NIN-SIM official that I found there, and he called an NCDC official and had that guy arrested immediately. So that's why I'm asking, is this something that was escalated, and that people should escalate these issues to the people that will resolve the issues for them?
Well, now that the die is cast, I think we need to now say it as it is, because now a lot of subscribers are deprived. NIN-SIM centers are our problems as we speak. Telcos, no issues, they will do whatever after the NIN. But those NIN and NIN-SIM centers are the headache. You are always there. When you go there any day, there are touts that work for some people who are in the NIN office, the NIN-SIM offices. And if you don't play ball, in quotes, you are not going to get anything done. And if you now want to do it normally as it is, using the word normal, it will take weeks and sometimes months before anything is done. And you may not even get anything done.
Let me get this right.
It's a problem.
You do agree with him when he said, well, there's the attitudinal part of this as well. People not going out enough or on time to get this done. I think we can own that
to some extent.
To some extent.
Yes.
But the challenge now is, the process itself. If you want people to indeed be willing to go, just like election, right? Make it easy, make it smooth, so that they can. But there are different layers to this. So there's the NIN-SIM offices where you can get this done.
Yes.
There's the telcos, the service providers, and then there are the agents. Now these agents, I think you have to pay them for you to go through this process. Or is it meant to be free as well?
Is actually meant to be free. Yes. It's actually meant to be free.
We listened to one of them. He said he paid 3,000 to one of the agents, 2,500 again.
That's what I'm saying. If you don't pay, you don't get anything done. Whereas the process is supposed to be a free one.
So NIN-SIM, telcos, and even the agents should be free.
Telcos, go to any telco center.
Of course, that's free.
No problems. Free, and they attend to you pretty well. But the agents, but how many of us as subscribers now go to the telco centers? And when they do, so many people are there. So they are left with whether to now queue for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, man hours wasted, or go to the ordinary NIN-SIM guy who now is demanding for X amount of money. If you want it fast, within 3 days, you go to Alausa at the NIN-SIM office. If you want it within 3 days, pay 10,000, you get it.
Sorry, Cardi, but you see, we can't absolve ourselves at all. Not completely. We can't absolve ourselves at all. If any human being, any Nigerian had a problem with a SIM card, he knows all the things that are connected to it. His bank records and everything is connected to that one. A number of other issues, that he has to deal with are connected to those ones. So you solve the problem whichever way. That's why one of the things that I take away from what Engineer Adebayo has said, if you have a challenge with a SIM, with a number, with a line that is important to your business, you resolve the issues no matter what. I saw a joke just earlier today of someone who says that the line that he uses to make transfers has been bad. I mean, that kind of thing, for instance, you want to ensure that that kind of thing doesn't happen to you. So wouldn't you say that people who really, really want to get this done, who go the extra mile?
That's exactly. That is what it is. Because if that line is so important to me and I must link it with my NIN, even if he tells me 10,000, I'm ready to pay so that...
That's where the problem is. It's also part of taking responsibility to ensure that those things don't happen. If it is supposed to be free, it should be, that kind of thing should be escalated to the authorities to let them know that these things are happening. I'm sure as president...
Encumbrances are put on your way. I mean, you've been there. You haven't gotten anything done in 1-2 weeks.
But there was no encumbrance on my way when I went there. I went to the same Alausa that you're talking about, and Alausa is not the only one. There is a 39-page document on the website of NIN-SIM that tells you all the agents and all the centers all over Nigeria that you can get these things done. So if there was no encumbrance for me to report the fellow who tried to connive with some people and some agents elsewhere, and this person, by the way, is another, security, an NCDC official, he was arrested immediately by his bosses. So I think it's for us to take the courage to take responsibility as Engineer Adebayo is advocating.
That's it, all of that, because I want this service. Is disturbing my business. And I've done it 2-3 weeks, no result. And I go there again, they say, okay, give me how much? Well, maybe for the sake of my business, I want to pay whoever that says I can do it.
I think this is a microcosm of the society we're in, the challenges we're facing. But let me take this to Engineer Adebayo. My colleague was asking about, the whole generation of the code and all that, how it's a challenge from the NIN-SIM side. But do you think that this process would have been easier if the telcos could actually maybe generate that code themselves and perhaps warehouse some part of it and have a central database? Would that have made the process easier?
Yes, it can, but by law, we are not identity management companies. And you see, the law establishing NIN-SIM is quite clear. NIN-SIM is the only agency of government that is allowed to process and warehouse citizens' data. So the best we can do is to collect and to send it to them. We are paid by the experience of the subscribers, no doubt. We do have historically experience with SIM registration, which we did as an industry for many years, and it was quite successful. And when we saw the bottleneck in the late part of 2020 when the minister gave the directive, we approached the minister through the NCC, our regulator, and asked that we can intervene by way of bringing to bear our experience with SIM reg to capture citizens' data. And rightly so, the Honorable Minister granted that. Otherwise, the situation will have been a lot more difficult today if the data is not, if operators are not able to capture citizens' data to support the work of NIN. Although the argument is also that you have an experience center almost in all local government areas of the country. And I think that has helped to a large extent. Now, on one side, we all can blame government to say government didn't do this, government did that, government did that. The first question I will ask is, where have you been in 14 months? This is the first question I will ask. But again, it is what it is today. The fact remains that government has now given the directive that this has to be done. So the best we can do is to continue to appeal to people. We are overwhelmed at the various experience centers. I don't know whether you have seen some of the reports. I mean, some of it also came on channels about the experience at the operator centers. It's quite tasking, actually. We are also concerned about safety of workers, safety of people. We're concerned also about the welfare of subscribers who come and queue and yell in the sun, some of them climbing the rails and all. It's very, very worrisome. We don't wish we are here, but it is what it is today. We all just must do what we can to make this better for everyone. So we are providing this feedback to government. We are giving government the appropriate feedback through our regulator on the real life field experience. But the request is not to have the ban lifted. The request is just to see what kind of optimization can be done at the points of bottleneck, part of which is at the end of NIN-SIM. So we are doing all this. We can only appeal to people to continue to at least take their turn on the queue, be patient, follow instructions at those centers to make it easy for all of us. The kiosk will not help anyone. The more orderly we are, the better. So we are as concerned as you all are. We buy into the idea of government. We are supporting government in this and on, like we always do in all cases. And at the end of the day, we are looking at the greater good. So we continue to appeal to everyone to please do the best that they can to make it easy for us. Our operators will continue to capture data. We'll continue to work with NIN-SIM to ensure that the integration is done early enough and verification is done early enough. But citizens also must support us by way of being a bit orderly, take their turn when they should, and follow the instructions so it can be possible. But certainly we don't expect
just
that
before we
government will again.
But, well, my apologies, Engineer Adebayo. Just before we take a break at about 8 o'clock, there's a question that my colleague raised earlier about that conversation, that review process with the Ministry of ICT and Digital Economy about the involvement of telcos concerning the process of, capturing data and registering Nigerians and all of that. The laws are clear, just as you have said. But was there any conversation that came out of that process, that review process that says we have a bottleneck here? The challenge here is the back-end integration at NIN-SIM. What was the resolution? Or what were the issues that were raised? And how can we resolve that one as quickly as possible so that we can get this issue, back, done with as quickly as possible?
Yeah, operators can't warehouse citizens' data. So the best we can do is to work with NIN-SIM to unlock the bottleneck. That's the best we can do, and that's all we are doing. So we can't warehouse citizens because by law we are not allowed to do it.
Well, I take that, Engineer Adebayo. Just 1 second. We'll take a short break now, but I agree with that. But we know that there are some data that are warehoused with you, with your members. When I register my SIM card with you, it is with you. Maybe some other data that's supposed to be with NIN-SIM, those are the ones. But we'll talk about that a little more when we return from this break. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Well, Engineer Adebayo, maybe you want to help us in this part of the conversation about the data that your members, the telecom companies, warehouse, and the ones that cannot be warehoused by law with your organizations.
All right. Part of the information we explore, part of the process that we explored in the commencement of the exercise in 2020, when we came on board in the digital ecosystem with NIN-SIM, also see the adaptability of the SIM card record with the NIN-SIM record. And NIN-SIM told us very clearly that the number of fields captured during SIM registration is not sufficient for citizens' identity management. For example, the number of fingerprints captured is not the same. In essence, the biometric is more extensive for citizen identity management. A few other fields that are required for citizen identity was not part of what was captured in the SIM reg. In essence, the SIM reg record data was sufficient for the purpose for which we need it, but it doesn't qualify for citizen identity management, and therefore they are not the same. They are not the same quantity of information required for identity management. That's what we've been told. And so what we have is what we have. It's only suitable for SIM record management and not for identity management.
Oh, I'll just quickly go to a realm which has been spoken about. We'll still touch on that in the other segment, but it's regarding security, because this whole NIN-SIM linkage was, part of the solutions, as it was said, to insecurity in the country, having to maybe locate criminals and terrorists, through the cell tower they're using, listening in maybe to their conversations as well, or even depriving them of communication, which is, barring them if their SIMs are not linked to their NIN, which will mean you need to get their details and biodata and all of that. But it would seem there's been a lot of controversy around that lately, especially with the recent spikes in security. Would you attribute that to this whole, extending the deadline, or perhaps this process or this database not being used as it ought to be used? What exactly, what challenges would you say are on your end?
Well, those are matters of security, and always when security matters are involved, there are many things that we don't know as ordinary citizens. Also, unfortunately, there is more report about the negatives than the successes achieved by the security agencies. And we must always, at times when we have opportunity, to commend those who work 24/7 to keep us safe, those who keep themselves in harm's way to keep us safe. So to the extent that we can, we are providing all the support that we should for security agencies. And really and truly, this SIM record, this SIM linkage has helped in a number of ways. It has helped in really number of ways. Unfortunately, insecurity is what it is. Always when there's an incident, there's more report about it than when there are failed attempts. So what I would like to say is that helps, that's helping. And I think the idea of government in having this process concluded is helpful. And we all just must embrace it, again, in the interest of our own safety and national security.
Well, in that statement you put out, I don't know, just a moment, let me come to our studio and ask if Chief Ogunbanjo would like to respond to that, because I know it's still in the news, actually, insecurity and how this can help. Would you say that so far it has done much? Because he says that, well, nobody talks about the good side. It's only when bad things happen that people raise it.
Well, insecurity is really a serious problem as we speak, and it's disturbing everyone. However, government is also not making things easy, or particularly the agencies. For instance, all these things we're looking at depend on telco services. Now, Engineer Adebayo knows this. There are threats now that 7,000 masts around airports across the country may be pulled down because of NCAA issues. Kwara State, because of right-of-way issues and looking at telcos to pay more taxes to Kwara State government, are threatening that, sorry, they are going to shut down telco services in Kwara State. Some time ago, some states of the north totally shut down. These are challenges you can call hiccups. However, how do we solve this? That is why we are saying, look, government should sit down, maybe on a monthly basis, telcos, what have you done? What can be done? How do we sensitize our people? Now that at least we've seen only 2 days of shutdown, of ongoing calls, we can see what it has cost to the subscriber. So let us appeal to government. Government, do one or two things. Let your agencies that should the National Orientation Agency, all that, let them start doing something so that the average person is aware, and then the rural populace should also the rural population should also know some of these things, right, and ensure that some of these centers are at least in all the local government headquarters, and tell them where subscribers should go to do their NIN-SIM linkage.
Clearly a big role for orientation agency to play here. But let's get into another realm of this conversation. And I'd like to begin with Engineer Debaya, because this concerns not just me, but millions of Nigerians. And that's the quality of service. Personally, I've had, the past few days have been terrible for me as a user, one of the service providers. I make a call in 10, 15 seconds. I stop hearing what the person on the other side is saying. And, that keeps happening. I'm talking 4-5 days now. And that's the experience of a lot of people. For some other people whose lines are not barred, by the way. You'd understand if the lines are barred, but not barred. They can't use the USSD services and all of that. What exactly is going on? Is it that in the process of trying to bar some lines, you mistakenly touched some other, subscribers? Or what exactly is happening?
Well, I think I'd like to throw more light to what Chief Ogubanjo just said, and then I'll relate that to what you are saying. By the way, the state is not Kwara, Chief. It's Kogi State. And you may have read in the report last week some of the challenge that we face in Kogi, which has now put Abuja and a few other states around Kogi at risk of a telecom blackout because of the behavior of government of that state due to revenue collection, and now they're shutting down sites and arresting those who work for telecom services. This goes to a bigger issue of the behavior of people in government, particularly if we talk about keeping the networks optimal and keeping the networks working. What we face in terms of site outage by way of behavior of agencies of government who are trying to collect revenue from operators has significant impact on quality of service. And it happens so in many states of the Federation. So it now depends on where you are and what is the point of impact and how that affects you. That's number one. Number two, there's also the issue of damage to cell sites. Vandalization has been now on the increase. This has become a major attraction for people on the cell site. So people actually go to attack this site for reasons of stealing diesel from there. Vandalization of the energy stations, the batteries powering the power inverters and UPS systems is now a major problem. Because of the problems of our public energy supply, inverter has become on high demand in the market. Some of the batteries stolen from telecom sites are sold to the open market, and innocently people buy this for use in their homes. So these are some of the problems that we have, and know that they have the impact on quality of services. So it depends on where you are and at what point. The fact remains that there is no operator that will not want to provide stable service, because if you don't have good service, it has an impact on not just on your image as an organization, it has also an impact on the purpose of which you are in service. And so none of us will provide poor quality services as a matter of choice. But the circumstances of the operating environment sometimes mitigate against being able to deliver good quality of service. And this is why I think government needs to do a bit more in what they do. Abuja, for example, part of the problems in Abuja is that we don't have enough capacity. We have not been able to do more in Abuja, again, because of the behavior of people who run FCD, the revenue agencies there. I think they are the advertising collectors in Abuja. It's made it difficult to do anything there. And our regulator had intervened, our minister had intervened. But where money is involved, it tends to blind people from reality. And this certainly has an impact on quality of service across the country.
Two issues to follow up on. You talked about Abuja. Well, I'm in Lagos, and we'll talk about the Lagos angle. But when you said lack of capacity for Abuja, what does that mean exactly? What kind of capacity is lacking?
We are unable to upgrade sites because the agency that is not granting approval to upgrade sites. We're not able to deploy new telecom sites because the agency that is not granting approval. Demands they are making on the rate there is extremely high. It has no basis in reality. And this has impact on ability to deploy adequate capacity to support Abuja. Then what's going on now in Kogi State has an impact on, potential impact on 10 states, including Abuja itself.
It's no doubt important to talk about your, working environment, and that's a major part of the conversation. But for the average subscriber, they want, the best quality of service because they are paying, in fact, for that service. But the challenge now is, yes, those issues persist on the side of the service provider, but there is no communication. If there's anything, I've had to actually look through, the messages I receive from my service provider, which most times I just, sometimes ignore because sometimes they're repetitive. But I've had to look through just to see if there's been some sort of explanation. Now, this is not 1 day, this is not 2 days, over 4 days, to see if there's some form of explanation or maybe apology or something, but nothing.
As I said, it depends on the point of impact. If there is no citywide outage or there is no location-based outage, it's a bit difficult to announce that you have a problem in this location. You have pockets of outages here and there that has a secondary impact somewhere, and that's the experience. But I think what you have said as feedback, maybe we need to do a bit more in terms of keeping the public informed, but also you don't want to create panic to the people because once you say to someone you have a problem of outage in your area, it tends to congest the network. People will then start calling, making calls that they don't have to call and all of that. But the fact remains that we all must take ownership of the national telecom network. We must take ownership, both as individuals and as government, and we must help operators to do better. We set out to provide good quality service, but certainly it's at some point the behavior of government often compromises our ability to do so. And I think this is the bigger issue that we need to talk about.
Well, it's instructive when you say that you've tried to take the issue up with the ministry that supervises your members and as well as the direct agency NCC concerned, and nothing has been done. I'm wondering, what are the next steps then? What are the other options open both to the telecom operators and the telecom subscribers?
Well, let me take, for example, this experience that we have in Kogi State. We had written to the governor of Kogi State. We had appealed. Our minister had intervened. Our regulator had intervened. Nothing is happening. So what we've decided to do in Kogi now is that once the site's powered down, we will not do anything. Because if you don't have access to the site to refuel, you don't have access to the site to do maintenance. Once systems go down, it goes down, we can't do anything. We just keep our hands up and say, oh, that we have tried. So let government resolve it. So
is government, in your opinion, my apologies, Engineer Adebayo, is the reverberating consequences of that which might happen from what you're saying, are the consequences really understood? Because, we know of several times when a telecom cell shuts down, there is insecurity, people can't be reached, people can't be helped for hours, sometimes for days. Is that implication understood?
That's the message we are driving. They need to take away the revenue objective because in most cases this is done for reasons of IGR in those states. They must take away that and look at the greater good. That's the message that we are driving actually. Because when you impact on sales side, you think you are penalizing the service provider. You're actually penalizing the citizens of your state. That's the message we are driving actually.
Well, there are those, Engineer Adebayo, who also say that it's not just about the issues that you have raised now that's responsible for these dropped calls and service infidelity. There are those who also allege that the fact that less than 10% of the sector has local content and indigenous participation is also an issue. You want to speak to that? I know it's a big issue that you're aware of.
No. I beg to disagree. I beg to disagree. If there is any industry that embraces local content, I think we do it more in telecoms than other sectors of the economy. I completely disagree with that. And there are statistics to that effect.
So how come then there are those issues that are being raised concerning mobile international termination rates and all of that, and it's becoming bigger in some quarters than necessary? There are those who also allege that.
And again, those are commercial issues. Those are commercial issues, and they don't have impact on technical quality of services. Those are commercial issues that people will talk about when their commercial interest is affected. But in terms of the main core, which is the quality of services, we face more of interference issues than these issues of commercial termination rate or no termination rate. So in terms of the problem that we face, we have more problems in our operating environment than we do have on issues of commercial exchange between players.
We're winding down now, and I'd like to take both of you as we wind down. First, engineer, is there the possibility or are there plans to increase tariff based on, the operating costs for service provider? I see Chief is protesting here, but let's just hear from you. With the environment, cost of diesel and all of that, are there still plans to increase tariff?
There are no such plans. We guarantee that there will continue to be service availability to all citizens in all places at all times. We don't have any plans for tariff review. We are consulting with our regulator and others in government to see what kind of sustainability we can have for the industry. But we don't have any immediate plan to have to review public tariff.
But might there be maybe medium or long term? How long is this assurance for? Is it for a year, 2 years, or for as long as the...
As it stands today, I don't know the dynamics that will be from tomorrow, but as it stands today, we don't have such plans. I don't know what will be dynamics tomorrow. I don't know what will be the indices of the economy tomorrow. I can only speak about what we know and what we see for today.
Well, Engineer Adebayo, as soon as I asked that question, Chief in the studio was protesting. So let me get your thoughts, really. So, I mean, even personally, as I asked the question, I was expecting a no. But, what is the thinking?
Tariff
really?
increase is a no till infinity. However, I must say that government, all, particularly state governments and even federal government, see the revenue to be derived from telecom companies as to overtax them out of giving us good quality service. And I quite agree with Engineer Adebayo, it is affecting telecom services. Beyond that is the fact that governments, the moment they want to get 1 or 2 more revenue, let's look at the telecom sector, rather than seeing it as a serious service that the Nigerian populace need. They should go beyond seeing it as a revenue earner and seeing it as something that comforts Nigerians, their businesses, to communicate and all that. They should see telecom services to benefit Nigerians only, not as a revenue generation for governments.
Well, but you don't see any possibility, Engineer, that, Chief Ogunbanja, that, these guys, they're in business as well. And cost of doing business is getting a little more unbearable for them. Cost of diesel, as my colleague said, you don't think we want to be a little sympathetic? It's just half kobo increase. Just, just say, don't answer anymore.
No.
Well, I want to thank you very much, gentlemen, for being a part of our conversation this morning. Engineer Benga Adebayo, Chairman, Association of Licensed Telecom Operators of Nigeria, Alton. He joined us virtually from Lekki, as well as Chief Adeolu Ogunbanjo, National President, National Association of Telecom Subscribers, NACOMS. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of our conversation this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Thank you.
So we're back after now to, of course, my colleague already teased it. We want to talk security. What do we do next? Stay with us.
We have extensive deliberations. A lot of the issues we discussed there, unfortunately, as defense matters go, were not things for public consumption. But I can assure you that there was a lot of collaboration. A lot of ideas came together in terms of how the security agencies can work together as opposed to speak together in one voice as opposed to different voices. We're talking about the all-important issue of whether or not there are elements within the military themselves that we need to deal with the issue of moles, like some have stated. We talked about training and retraining. We talked about the issue of capacity and allowances. We talked about several things. A lot of them, like I said, touch on security, and I'm not at liberty at this point. But for us to have been in there for 4 or 5 hours, you must know that we made some good headway and extensive decisions were made.
Well, that's precisely what we're talking about now. That was the Speaker of the House of Representatives yesterday speaking to journalists after the meeting that the members of the House of Reps had with the security chiefs. Remember that they had earlier summoned them. They hadn't shown up and the House was cross. But yesterday they showed up and they had that security meeting, which lasted 45 hours from what you heard there. But while they were having that discussion, it would seem that another attack was happening in Kaduna. We understand that Beningwari, a military base in Beningwari, came under attack. And it's still unclear as to how many soldiers lost their lives in that incident. What we understand now is that about at least over 10 deaths of soldiers were reported from that attack. We're not certain how many yet. I guess there will be an official briefing much later today. But Kaduna has now seen or has become a hotbed of sorts, especially since this drone attack. We have with us this morning Mr. Kabir Adamu, who is a security consultant and also the founder and managing director of Beacon Consulting Limited. You're welcome to Sunrise Elite this morning.
Thank you, Mopi. Good morning.
Good morning. I was just about to ask, because I know that you've already spoken on this, train attack. I was just going to ask, when we invited you, I'm sure you must have wondered, what haven't I said? On the issues of security, especially around Kaduna now. From what you can see, from your own assessment, what theory would you think that this latest attack is confirming for you?
So in simple terms, if we put this instrument that we used in mathematics in primary and secondary school, that you put and you draw a perimeter or a radius around a location.
A protractor?
A protractor.
Yeah.
If you put that on a paper, let's say in Kaduna Metro, and you now draw a cycle around Kaduna, everything that has been happening over the last few weeks, months, will fall into that radius. And so that tells us in simple terms that we're dealing with a threat element that has the versatility and the capacity to move around. And so have our responses been able to keep track of the movement of that threat element?
What's the point of that?
I'm using Kaduna Metro as an example.
As a point? As
a point.
So the perimeter will cover,
Kaduna,
or the radius will cover...
Kaduna as a whole. But beyond that, if, for instance, I'm doing a threat assessment, which is what I've done in my consultancy, I would include about 5 or 6 states, starting from Niger State all the way to Sokoto State, and in fact to Niger Republic. We're dealing with one threat element that takes advantage of a forest that traverses the 6 states.
That's only one half of a circle. I was thinking that the proper circle, if you were to use Kaduna as a radius, would also include perhaps the FCT as well, especially since Niger is involved.
Well, the reason why I haven't included FCT has its own special security arrangement, and this is a public forum, so I don't want to speak about that security arrangement. If you notice, we've been insulated more or less from these types of attack. mainly because we've got our security protection. And so why can't we replicate that security protection in those other locations? I was making the point around the forest that traverses about 6 states.
Okay.
So if you allow this threat element, it's able to move from location to location. And unfortunately, that's what we've allowed. Now, Birningwari that you used as an example, Birningwari is on the border of Zamfara and Niger State. So no matter the extent of protection you put, let's say in Kaduna, as long as there are these vulnerabilities, these gaps in Zamfara and Niger, it's very easy for the threat element in this instance to move between Zamfara into Kaduna or Niger into Birningwari, as the case may be. And from there, frankly, to everywhere. Now, I don't have no intention to maybe shock you or add to your trauma, because all of us are traumatized at the moment. Just yesterday, beyond Birningwari, there was another attack along the Abuja-Kaduna highway, close to the now deconstructed toll gate. There's a small community there that was attacked. And from what I'm hearing, about 10 people or more may have died from that attack, and several others, probably 20, abducted. So the threat element has shown a versatility that unfortunately we as a people have not put in place commensurate security measures to not only stop that versatility of the threat element, but to contain and possibly to destroy that threat element. And that's why we're where we are.
Mm. You know, so many questions are swarming in my head, and I remember watching my colleague's program, Politics Today, and, you know, he was speaking, he had a panel and was speaking with a few guests talking about what exactly these terrorists really want. Because they're not questions. I'm wondering in my head, are we dealing with a group of ragtag terrorists, or are we now dealing with something that is very organized? There have been talks about how ISWAP has infiltrated what used to be opportunists, the band of opportunists, and it looks like we're now beginning to see threats that are escalating in nature. But then there are still questions as to whether it's different cells that are now operating differently and independently, or whether this is just one group of people, maybe the same group which attacked the train are now harassing villages, or were also the ones that ran over the operating base in Birningwari. What do we know about these groups? Do we have sufficient intel on them?
I think we do. And I say this with all sense of responsibility, at least in the private space where I operate. I know that enough research has been conducted to tell us that we're dealing with disparate groups that, to an extent, are interconnected. There is a cultural element to their operations, and that's what worries me. The issue around prestige. If one of them carries out an attack that receives the kind of publicity like what the Abuja-Kaduna bound train received, the possibility of another one wanting to do another attack, either of the same profile or of a higher profile, to boost that prestige is also high. Because you are dealing with a group of bandits who see themselves as, you know, leaders in their various sort of arrangements or cells, if for lack of a better word. And once one does such an attack and his prestige is increased, then the other one would want to do the same thing. We saw that when they were targeting schools. It started with one school, and then they started targeting the same school. So that possibility also remains. Now, you made reference to their partnership with the terrorist groups. That's a fact. It's been well documented. There are different publications, research. I do release a report every month. Now, I have been consistently saying this from September till date in all my reports, that these groups have been dislodged from their main cells. And what we will see is one-off attacks. In fact, at the point I use the word bestial, because I know the ferocity of the attacks that they would carry out. They are angry, they are moving from point A to point B, and so any community they meet, they are going to express that anger. And unfortunately, that is what we're seeing. So with a high sense of responsibility, the intel is out there. Now, are we using that intel? Unfortunately, I do not have access to public security organizations' intel, but I know in the private space, we do have enough intel. We make that available to all the government. In fact, in my case, it's free. I publish it and I put it out there. I have been to several releases. As an example, CDD, I'm trying to remember her name now. Idayat heads. not too long ago, together with Daily Trust and MacArthur Foundation, they released amazing reports. In fact, the level of research they did was quite outstanding. They interviewed 2 of the major bandit leaders, and a lot of the questions came up that, well, if journalists could go and interview them, what's stopping the public security organizations from arresting them? So there is enough intel, at least within the public space. And I can tell you as far back as 2019, I know that even within the public space, they've been able to identify at least the basis of all the bandits. And at that time, I know there was an attempt, an operation to go, from base one to the other to make sure that they either arrest or where they resist arrest to kill them. So intel is not the issue here. I'm almost confident of that.
Well, we know that organizations like yours also advise private institutions, especially those who are concerned, who need to work in the north and usually are concerned about security. And we know that for years, a number of private security organizations had warned their companies, the companies which they advised not to take the train because there were blind spots along. And this is knowledge that the Nigerian government has. So there have been questions as to what exactly was preventing us from taking action till now. And also given the intel, which you say is freely available, did we just take security for granted? Did we have an idea that we were invincible, or were we just waiting for this to happen?
One word, impunity. And I say this with all sense of responsibility. We need to improve the level of accountability within our public sector, including the security sector. I mean, in October last year, there was an attempted attack on that train. You are a journalist, you cover. Correct me if I'm wrong. Has one person been held accountable for that incident? Now, this is almost how many days? Today is Wednesday. This is 8 days after the incident, or the latest one on 28th of March. I'm not aware that an investigation is being conducted. I am aware, based on the hearings at the Parliament yesterday, that the MD of the Railway Corporation admitted to the fact that the government of Kaduna State had written officially to at least the Kaduna branch or the unit.
He admitted that much here in our studios. Yeah.
So, Mokwe, impunity. We can go back and forth around it, but that's it, impunity.
But they had a different take on it.
They
had a different take.
That take is not acceptable.
He said that that they weren't specific about the day or the time, and that they also thought that it would be given in to the terrorists. As far as they were concerned, they were doing their jobs, and they wanted the security agencies who had given them that warning to do theirs as well.
In security management, you prioritize life. I have reason to question the capacity and capability of the department responsible for security within the Ministry of Transportation and the Railway Corporation. And I say this with all sense of responsibility. You prioritize life. Every other thing is secondary. If that is the statement that came out of the MD of the NRC, and I'm sorry, he needs to understand that life is sacrosanct, where in any circumstance you cannot lower the risk, you stop operations. My job as a security risk management specialist is to lower the risk. At the point where the risk is medium, I have to take steps to lower it. If it surpasses medium, stop. Because frankly, there is no alternative to life. Everything we're doing is to ensure life is protected. So that, I think, is at the crux of the matter. How do public officials take that responsibility that life is sacrosanct, and they know that if they give way to, and the kind of dropping of the ball that we saw that allowed the incident to happen, something would affect them. That is the impunity I'm talking about. If, as the head of an organization, you were written an official letter telling you that there is a risk and that risk is high, believe me, you have no other choice. If you understand that life is sacrosanct, then you have no other choice but to stop operations until you are guaranteed that that risk is lowered. And, I'm not a lawyer, but I want to think that statements by the MD himself and by the minister are enough grounds for liability if the victims of that train want to go to court. And I'm hoping that that will be tried at some point, so that this impunity that drives activities within the public sector can be reduced. It's not something that is new. It's something that, if you look back over the years, we've transcended it. Last year, I documented in my consultancy about 9,000 deaths. And it's shocking that not a single person has been held responsible for the death of about 9,000 Nigerians. In 2014, it was around 13,000 Nigerians. Not a single person was held responsible. So I don't want this to seem as if it's something to do with this current administration. This impunity transcends several administrations, and it's something we need to change as a country. How do we hold our public officers accountable so that they understand that they are serving one single purpose, which is to improve safety and security within the public sector? And, you know, like I said, it cuts across a lot of the sectors, but insecurity is even more important. And the reasons for this is because of the history of our military era, where you couldn't question a lot of things. Unfortunately, even into this democratic, system, this is the Fourth Republic, we have imbibed that and incorporated it as a culture. We need to change that.
Well, talking about accountability now, we know that on that train, we're still looking for over 100 people who were said to have been taken away. We understand 8 people lost their lives in that incident, very tragic. 26 were injured. A lot of them have been treated and have now been discharged. Some of them are still suffering because we know that some people suffered first-degree burns and they don't heal easily. But we also know that people were carted away. Some have been confirmed safe. The NIRC did release some figures. I guess they're trying to update the figures as we go for those who are currently safe. But then there are questions as to those who have been kidnapped, how we have not heard a word from these people. And it's also questioning our own capacity to respond in incidences like this. We've seen the highest level. I think the Chief of Defense Staff has paid a visit, the COAS has paid a visit. Well, we didn't see any of the intelligence agencies, but then there are questions as to whether or not there is intel as to where these people are.
So one of the first things that I noticed, and which the country I think we need to address, we have a national emergency response plan. That should have been activated. In the UK, during the bombing in 2004, 2005, when I think about 4 persons went on the underground train and blew up, and then I think almost a month after or 2, it was the bus that was bombed. We saw how they activated. First was the Cobra, and then after that, you saw how the government responded, setting up a center where the intel services responded almost speedily. Now, we did not activate our national emergency response plan. I've heard from accounts by victims that it was the military that backed them out, from the point zero to a location where the military vehicle was waiting, and that from there to the hospital. Now, where are the other agencies that are supposed to be involved in that national emergency response plan? The military should not have been. In fact, left to me, the military should have provided the perimeter security, while the several other security, not even security, first responders in this instance, who are supposed to deploy in a national emergency. Now, these are the type of things that I believe we should have been investigating and then correcting. Because, God forbid, this is probably not going to be the only national emergency that we'll have. Others would follow. So if we do not correct mistakes that occur in these instances, that's how they will continue to reoccur, unfortunately. Point number 2, your question around intelligence. Intelligence, unfortunately, needs to be harvested. Intelligence is not something that just comes to you. And from where I stand, by the way, I'm supporting certain family members that have victims, as it were. So I know a little bit more than the ordinary. Intel is there, but we need to harvest it. Before the incident occurred, there was intel. I can tell you that for every operation, whether a friendly operation or a hostile one, they would usually test your capabilities. So there must have been something that occurred around the train services that would have, if we had good intel harvesting capabilities, that would have told us an attack is impending. Now, apart from that, on the day of the incident, they drove. From what we're hearing, they came in about 4 vehicles and probably with their motorbikes. And beyond that, they took their time to plant an IED on the rail line. All of this were intel that could have been harvested. Somebody saw them within the communities around that area. How come of all the intel services that we have in this country, now we have about 4 that are statutory, then all the security departments, 27 of them have intel departments within them, apart from this statutory 4 that I've mentioned. So how come none of them acted on this, harvested rather, and then acted on it? Now we're told that the government of Kaduna did write a letter formally to the railway corporation. That was not actionable intelligence. It was rather a forewarning that, look, something was going. I'm talking of actionable intelligence that tells you something is going to happen. If we had done what we were supposed to do, we would have harvested that actionable intelligence and it would have prevented the death of 8 persons. Now, what I'm saying is that that has happened. We need to ensure that it doesn't happen again. Perhaps an investigation identifying who did what, who didn't do what, telling us in clear terms what the lapses were and making sure that we block those lapses. Like it happened after the 9/11 in the US. They did an investigation, they came up with suggestions, and before you know it, they set up Homeland Security, making sure that something like that doesn't happen again. Now, it's not a guarantee that it will not happen again, but at least you are reducing the possibility of a recurrence. I'm not seeing all of that, unfortunately, at the moment.
Yeah, but for those who have been abducted, I mean, you say you're supporting the families. Do we have sufficient intel that these people are they interested in ransom, or what are they asking for?
Again, I have to be very careful not to endanger the lives of the victims, but there are 2 things that are important to us here. The governor of Kaduna State did come out to say he believes that these are terrorists, and so they are not going to make a financial demand. I would leave it at that. Number 2, I also think we need to be extremely careful. I think channels are doing an amazing job, but there are certain other media houses that have gone ahead to even, display the names and faces of some of the victims that are missing. Now they're endangering their lives, because currently what these groups are probably doing is profiling their victims. And if you do that, you're supporting them to profile their victims. If, God forbid, let me use one that everybody knows, an MD of a particular bank. The moment they see an MD of a particular bank, if they are, before what they were hoping to get as ransom was a petty amount, with that, what some media houses have done is actually to allow them to increase whatever it is. So we need to be very mindful of that, both as the media and then, some of us who do speak on public fora about that. First off, they are allowing the victims to call their family members. I think it's important to mention that. Number 2, from what we're told and from the interaction, they are not harming them in any way. So it's a waiting game. If what the governor said is true, then maybe the demand is going to be political. But for now, no financial ransom has been made, as far as I know, apart from one case that we were not sure what the reasons were. They treated that one differently. Ransom was paid and he's been released.
Okay. Well, I understand my colleagues would like to come into the conversation. Gentlemen.
Well, thank you, Mark. We're quite startling conversation, really. But I just follow up on one of the questions Mark raised. If we indeed know what we're up against, if we have intel and all that, are we able to quench this? Do we have enough, is it firepower? Is it personnel? Are we in a good position to end this? And I think it's important to be honest in all of this. Do we have what we need to end this? I was looking at global firepower. We're rated 35th in the world. I'm talking our military in terms of, is it personnel and all of that. But in reality, are we able, as it is now, to quench this?
Yes, but only if we change 2 things. I talked about accountability earlier on, and then I'm going to add a second element, which is responsibility. They are related, both of them. If we've got these 27 ministries, departments, and agencies, and there is a clear directive telling them, and this directive is coming from the presidency, telling them to go after these bad guys, and there is a time frame from that. And then we develop performance indicators, key performance indicators, and we follow up on it using this responsibility element that I mentioned. Believe me, we'll get to the bottom of this in a very short time. Yes, I'm not going to rely, or rather base my conclusion on the military. The military, even at a very generous level, are only 4 out of these 27 that I've mentioned. Our national power goes beyond the military. Our security sector goes beyond the military. Part of the mistake that we're doing is putting all of this burden on the military. They're doing an amazing job. In my earlier remarks, I expressed how they were the only ones, and perhaps with the police, that responded after the incident, when in reality, our national emergency protocols requires, if I'm right, about 12 other agencies to be involved. So how come those other agencies were not involved? If we're going to come to the end of this, we need to see responsibility by all the 27, especially the intelligence department. By now, if the intelligence department are working, and they can, believe me, if we give them a clear tasking order, asking them to go and produce the names, profiles, and pictures, membership, funding capabilities, their weapon repository, and give them a time frame, they would produce this. Now, part of the reason why we're seeing that is because there is no, accountability, as it were. So the two, lack of accountability and then responsibility, are things that we need to change if we're going to end this. I know that we as a country, almost all our partners across the world praise us for our ability to enhance issues around, especially human intelligence. And this is the time to use human intelligence. I want a situation, if we do what I've just suggested, a clear tasking order, that when the leadership or the membership of these groups, sneeze or even wake up from sleep, we have the capacity to know that they are sneezing and they are waking up from sleep. And believe me, we can do it.
Well, you talked about the human intelligence, and that's the part that I'm interested in. The communities, there are those who reference a critical role for the communities. They see something, say something thing. How significant do you see that, especially when we also hear that some of these communities are not very confident that if they said something indeed, when they see something, they are protected. How do we balance those? Human intelligence against protecting the people?
It's absolutely important. A couple of years ago, not the immediate past Inspector General of Police, the one before him, I remember when he visited the Abuja-Kaduna highways and had to change almost the entirety of police personnel that were stationed along the road. For this same point, he was of the opinion that a lot of them had been compromised. And so we need to change that. If we're going to harvest intelligence, especially from communities, then they need to be sure that we're protecting them. Where we're not protecting them, and you're a journalist, you need to just go out to Kaduna, go to Igabi local government at the moment, go to Birningwari, where you'll be shocked at what you hear from those communities. So if we're going to change this, we have to ensure protection for the communities. It's shocking that even as we're talking, the kind of mantra for which security is being approached hasn't changed. We were in 2019, we came up with a beautiful document, the revised National Security Strategy 2019. And that document identified human security as the focus of security. And we're told that there's going to be a paradigm shift from the state-centric security to the human-centered security. Unfortunately, that has not been implemented. If we change that and then reduce the emphasis, as it were, on those who have money, they are the ones who get security. If you are privileged, you get security. If you are not privileged, then you are empty. If you go to my local government as an example, and I'll be amazed if we get up more than probably 20 of all these 27 MDAs that I mentioned in terms of personnel in my local government. But if you come to one individual in any of the big cities, you find out that that individual, if he's politically exposed or he has the money, he has up to 20 security personnel. So the citizens, the communities are seeing this, they are aware of it. If for us to change the narrative where we see something, we say something, we need to change that. The ethos, the functions of the security department will have to change from this state-centered approach to the citizen-centered approach. If we do that, then people will be willing to make available the information that they have at their disposal. These elements are not ghosts. They subsist from among us, and people know what they're doing. And part of the reason why they're not making that available is because they're afraid for their own life. Almost all communities in North Central and Northwest Nigeria have their own security arrangements, different from the public sector security arrangements. And in itself, it's a challenge. Time will not allow me to go into that, but that in itself has also created a challenge that we're seeing actually the consequence at the moment.
Well, so many more questions to ask, believe me, but let's mull on the ones that you've given us to ponder on today. Kabir Adamu is a security consultant and also the founder and managing director of Beacons Consulting. Thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning.
My pleasure. Okay.
Well, we have feedback from you. Let's start with this one from Comrade Dari. He said they called them Boko Haram, bandits, or Fulani herdsmen. But the truth of the matter is that as a nation, we're dealing with terrorist activities. Government seems overwhelmed with their recent activities, which suggest failure on the part of social contract.
On same NIN-SIM linkage, Festus Akinboyewa says that 74 million SIMs have not been linked to NIN after 2 years, shows many Nigerians have taken the government initiative for granted. We must take SIM NIN link initiative seriously because of the insecurity in our country. There's need for proper identification of the owner of a SIM.
Well, Olagunjo Oladele's tweet is on security, and this relates to border control, saying, how are we addressing illegal infiltrators who crossed over from neighboring countries? What happened to the National Population Commission database? They conducted population and housing census in 2006, which can be the checks and balances on illegal infiltrators.
Well, 2006 was a long time ago. I think we're long overdue for another census. A lot has changed in that time. Thank you so much for your feedback this morning and for watching. I'm Maupe Ogun Yusuf.
I'm Kayode Okikulu.
I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful day.